Ashwin, we got survey scores yet?
We do indeed. And the survey says 47% of the audience are vaporizers, 25% smoke, 23% sublingual under the tongue, and 5% other.
We won't ask any questions about that. But it's interesting on the smoking one. We'll come to that question in a bit. So, yes, and there will be Q&A at the end as well, so please save up your questions. Mark, let's kick off with you. We're talking about prescribed products here. So what are the kinds of products and routes of administration that you prescribe through clinics, and has this changed over time in terms of product and range and choice?
Yeah, well, I never worked in a clinic. It was just a normal general practice in Australia. It's not like every GP is prescribing it, but there is rapidly increasing numbers are. And to start with, I mean, you don't know what you're doing, so you start pretty cautiously and start with oils, which was the simplest route to start with. Flower is really taking over down under now, and I think as more of us got accomplished at prescribing and knew we weren't causing harm, then we would get more adventurous with prescribing flower. I mean, a lot of the time, it was patients were coming to me and telling me what they'd researched, what was going to be best for them, and I was just doing the prescription.
Yeah. Well, and did you feel kind of nervous at the time? That's quite an odd situation to be in as a doctor, right?
Yeah. To start with, I mean, we've got our book of medicines and we look up the side effects and we take that risk, but with something that's a little bit undocumented, you're not quite sure what might come back at you. But in my experience, pretty much nothing. I had one lady we worked out eventually, she was allergic to the oil. It wasn't the medicine, so it's just really simple.
Yeah. And you talked a bit about flower there. Was that also a challenge? That's not, the kind of medicines I'm sure you'd been used to prescribing.
No, it's a little bit more complicated because you've got to get the right device and people have got to pay. I think the approved devices down under start at $600 or 300 quid. So,
wow.
So that's what you're supposed to do. But obviously everyone does it slightly differently according to what they can afford.
Cool, thank you. And we'll come and talk about flower in a bit again. Arjun, over to you now. What is driving the choice of products that have been supplied on the market? Is it evidence-based, or is it mainly around THC, CBD ratios and content?
Yeah, I mean, I guess when we look at the broad range of products now available on the UK market, and it has taken us time to get to the range that we have available today, we do have a broad range of CBDs, THCs, isolates, full spectrums, broad spectrums, and I think it's an effort to try and make as much product available to patients as possible, and trying to find what really works for patients. Now, I wouldn't say that a lot of that has been necessarily efficacy data driven, and it's been driven through availability largely, because it is a new supply chain, it is a new market, and regulated medicines and finding ways to supply regulated medicines is not simple. I'm speaking as a distributor. And it's a tricky market to be in. So our focus actually has been on trying to find products that have some form of efficacy data available on them. So we've been scouring the globe for the last 3 years, trying to find predominantly oils that have either statistically significant observational data collected over a period of time, either retrospectively or actively, or even up to phase 2 RCT studies on specific indications with specific products. And really that's where we see the initial steps of trying to engage with the wider mainstream clinical community around this product does work. Right, there is efficacy data that has been collected in a controlled fashion that shows that this works. And if you don't believe that, look around you, because you can see in this market today that it's helping people. And that's really the conversation that we need to start having to be able to drive this further and be able to improve access for patients, not only in this room, but wider across the country.
And are you seeing different types of products? Is it mainly oils and flower? Are people trying to innovate around?
Yeah, so actually, there's lots of innovation that's actually happening at the moment. So we're engaging with companies that have, and I know Danny was mentioning this earlier because they are available in other markets, sublingual strips, buccal wafers, soft gel capsules, sublingual tablets, metered dose vaporization devices where you can control the amount of an active substance you're getting. I know it's moving towards a more pharmaceuticalization of the market, but if we're trying to engage the wider clinical community and we're really expecting this to hit mainstream and potentially the NHS one day, that is the path that we're going to need to take, because we need to engage with clinicians in the way that they're sort of used to being engaged with, such that we can then open the conversation to start discussing this product more.
Yeah, thank you. And that kind of segues nicely into my question to you, Callie, with your researcher hat on. What is the state of research in terms of cannabis medicines, in terms of specific conditions and delivery methods, and maybe in terms of future facing, what can you predict might happen and how this could evolve?
Are we talking in this country or are we talking around the world?
I mean, give us both.
So this country, we are so behind, it's unbelievable. And that's due to the barriers that we keep hitting. We've been told there's not enough research, but then we've got licensed cultivators who don't have commercial license and can't supply product. So how can research be done if a product isn't on the market? If we look out to Israel on the other side of things, there is massive amounts of research. Canada as well, and the US. There is a lot coming from there, but unfortunately we have a little bit of a snobbery in this country, an academic snobbery that goes, oh, that's not good enough. That's not been done in this country. We're not accepting that as being, relevant data. When it is good enough, and the real world evidence as well. We've also got the issue as well of getting funding. So applying for funding is near impossible when you mention the C word. If you use the H word, hemp, that's all okay. But you use the C word and we're not even entertaining you. We've also got the universities are still very nervous of the C word. And I quite often, within my social media, will use the plant that shall not be named because of getting shadow bans. It's the only way that I can get this through. So we need universities to accept this. We need universities to stop being so nervous about being associated with cannabis, and us all talking about it can help move that forwards. But we are seeing research coming through. We are seeing new delivery methods. We're seeing transdermal patches, which is a much slower release that can be done over a period of time. We are starting to see water-soluble forms of cannabinoids coming through as well. So there is movement forward, but unfortunately, this country was still very behind.
Yes, that's a sad story, isn't it?
I was just going to say, just to add to that, is the scheduling of cannabis. Being Schedule 1, it complicates everything, the research. Just to get an oil tested or a flower tested, you need to go to a lab, which is Schedule 1 license. And to get that Schedule 1 license is next to impossible because the Home Office really don't want this moving forward. So I think, again, we keep banging on about the government being able to help, and they keep saying it's a clinical issue. Well, actually, there is a government element to it to help producers to come forward with products that are commercial for research to happen.
Yes, they could definitely help to make things a bit easier. Callie, just back to you quickly. If looking to the future, what would you like to see? Is it sort of more bioavailability, in terms of future innovation around medicines?
As far as research, I would like to see real-world evidence being accepted. I'd also like to see the easing of the licensing so that research can actually occur. This is a substance that's never actually caused any deaths. So why is there such strict licensing regulation around this? If this was something like opium or nutmeg, which nutmeg does have its psychoactive properties, and if you eat enough of it, will kill you, along with willow as well, which contains aspirin. So we need to move that so that we can actually go further forwards with the research. For me, I want to make it a lot easier so that I can do research, that I haven't got to apply for 17 licenses before I can even think about doing it, and not feel the stigma that I get associated with it when I say I'm a cannabis scientist. It's, oh, you're a wacky-backy one, are you? Nice one.
Yeah, some very practical issues there. Arjun, were you going to chip in?
Yeah, I was just going to say that actually I would agree, and it's interesting that the discussions we've been having with clinicians over the past few months, as we've brought data from around the world and packaging it correctly and engaging with them and showing them that data and getting them around a table has been the most difficult bit. But once they're at the table and you can actually engage with them and show them the efficacy of the data, they do accept that. So it's a matter of getting through the door is, I think, actually the bigger problem that we're facing.
Just like to also add to that as well, I'd like us also to see sex-specific research being done. A lot of stuff is done on males because it's cheaper to do. We have two different endocannabinoid systems. I have a womb, so I have more CB2 receptors. So we need to make it specific and more targeted towards the actual conditions as opposed to just going THC, CBD. We need to be looking at all the other compounds, the terpenes, the flavonoids, the fatty acids, the lignins. All of them are all involved in the entourage effect, and we need to take that into consideration, not just keep banging on about THC and CBD, because they are not the end of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, for me, one of the most interesting aspects is this personalised medicine perspective. Rosie, over to you now. As a patient, what's been your experience of sort of experimenting and trying to find the right product for you? And have you had to source it from the illicit market as well? What the sort of experiences you had there and differences?
For me, the legal route, since I'll talk about that first, since being on Project 21 and finding a clinic that will take me and medicate me, is trial and error. And if you look into the trial and error and the costs of the doctors, the prescriptions and everything, it works out to be a lot of money. So I struggle in other areas of my life financially to be able to fund a trial and error that I knew worked for me before, and it's just about, unfortunately, bureaucracy and many other things that I'm not going to have time to talk about very briefly. I've smoked cannabis since I was about 17. I'm 34 now. I grew up in London, lived in Brighton for 8 years, needed it at hard times in my life, and I had chronic pain. I was hit by a car in 2014 as a pedestrian and things like that. And yeah, it is different. It is different because what I'm getting on the street in the past is not the same. It's not regulated the same. I haven't got the same person to go to and go, talk about this side effect. Someone that I feel like I can trust, that's a professional. I do my own research. I consider myself quite an intellectual person, but it's different when you have someone to talk to that knows more than yourself and that you can find online. I always knew it worked in the past, but it's meant that I don't have side effects that I previously had when I was smoking it. I now just vape it. I couldn't get on with an oil. That's because of my sensory needs. As I said, sensory processing cannot cope with oil-based substances. Sorry, 1 second. Just making sure I don't ramble off topic, which happens a lot. So as I said, I vape it now. It's brilliant. It's changed my life, honestly. And I just wish that the government and around the world would, give people, like patients, the actual understanding that they know their bodies better than research that is outdated, and especially in, like yourself touched upon, about the male and female perspective of how these products react in our bodies and things.
Yeah, thank you. You talk about trial and error there, and Mark, I'm bringing you in here quickly. Is there an element of trial and error that happens in general medicine when you're prescribing a new drug to a patient?
Yeah, it would have to be. I mean, some of the best patients were the ones who'd done all the research already and knew exactly what they wanted, and that was very, very simple to do the prescription. But otherwise, people might have been an older person coming along with arthritis and not able to sleep and pain, and they'd want me to direct them. But a lot of them would say, "Look, I don't want THC. I don't want to get addicted." You're not going to get addicted. So with a range of products, if you've got a decent range of products that you can rely on, then you will try one, and if they can afford it, they'll try a different one and try a different one. But so often it comes down to cost. And that's even in a country where, in Australia, because of economies of scale, the price is about half of what it is here. So it was a little bit easier doing it over there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Matt, over to you now. Firstly, well done on a great conference. Thank you for organising. As a parent, so we're going to talk a bit about consistency here. How have you found the clinical route? And, consistency is an often cited issue in this space. So, how's this affected you and your son?
Me personally, we started with Bedrolite. We were prescribed literally around the corner at Portland Street Hospital a couple of years ago now. And that product was extremely expensive. And it got to a point where, for us personally, financially, we couldn't afford it. I did end up growing my own. Never gave it to Charlie because, again, I didn't know what I was giving my child. So we've spoken about that already. But it's And now he's being prescribed Silixa, which is from Israel, from Balpharma in Israel, which is IMC GMP, not EU GMP.
Is that Israeli GMP?
Israeli medical cannabis GMP,
Right.
so specifically to cannabis, which is like years ahead of where the UK is. Now, unfortunately, the MHRA now no longer see that as valid, and as of January the 1st, that's now going to be stopped. So not only does my child, his prescription's up, the same as Bailey and Rachel and Craig. So yeah, it's something that we're constantly battling. You know, being stuck in the private sector, the consistency isn't there. And I think going to looking at various different products, so to move a product, there's no COAs either. So as a parent, I know the COA of what my child's using, we've had it tested. There is no other product on the market that's the same to that. So, and with epilepsy, it's, as other parents have mentioned, the smallest changes can bring on seizures. And yeah, trying to keep that, you know, that consistency is really, really crucial. And at the moment, it seems to be commercially led prescribing rather than we need data in actual products to help make clinical choices and for parents to make better choices as well.
Yeah, and I mean, that sounds like really tough, particularly when it comes to kids. Do you have to have a plan B for if your particular product that works for you isn't available? Have you managed that?
We don't really. I can say there's very few products available within the private sector for children. We are now leaning on the NHS and potentially having to look at other pharmaceuticals, which is really difficult because my son's been seizure-free predominantly now for this year. So to try and, in my head, go back to where we were before, 120 plus seizures per day, there is no plan B. You just literally, we're just trying to fight everything to try and keep this medicine available.
Yeah, that's something that's super tough. One of the other things that you just brought up was around COAs, and you know, maybe you can tell people exactly what information is given with certain with products, and
yeah, at the moment,
and what's lacking. Really.
Yeah, at the moment it's just CBD and THC. That's all we know. There's no other information. We don't even get the microbial content. We don't even know if there's heavy metals in there. There shouldn't be because it's GMP. But that's the same for the clinicians as well. So there's very, very little information that we can receive to make that, you know, informed choice. I think we really need to be seeing full analysis now of the, you know, phytocannabinoids, the terpenes, and, you know, the other parts of the product. That needs to be changing.
So that data has to exist, is what I would say, because to raise an import license from the MHRA, you need to provide them a full panel COA with heavy metals, with pesticides, with microbiological content. So that data does exist and is in this country somewhere. So you should be given it, in my opinion. So that's something that should be made available to you.
So, Arjun, why wouldn't that be, if it's in existence, why would that not be supplied?
I personally wouldn't know. I mean, yeah.
That's MHRA. So there's no, MHRA don't require importers to provide that information.
That's not true.
Is it not?
That's not true, unfortunately. The MHRA do require you to provide that information. Having just raised an import license in the last week, I can tell you that.
That's why, isn't it? Then?
Yeah, so that's why. Yeah, that's why I can say with such confidence that COA must exist, and it should be shared with you. So happy to look for it for you, Matt, because it will exist out there.
Great. Let's start demanding that. Excellent. Thank you both for that. So this is a slightly sort of potentially divisive question around cannabis flower. Clearly it has medical properties, but can it be considered a medicine given sort of variability? I'm looking at you, Callie, here, but because it's something you and I talked about before. So I think, you know, it undoubtedly has medical qualities, but the difficulty about categorizing it as a medicine for its variability and I guess dosing as well is quite difficult conceptually with it. What's your views on that?
Flower is definitely a medicine. Is it a pharmaceutical? No. It's a square hole trying to go into a round peg trying to go into a square hole. It isn't going to happen. I personally, and this is a personal opinion, it's probably not going to be a very popular opinion, but I think we need to remove flower from being prescribed. I think it needs to be available for everybody to be able to purchase as and when they want. Like alcohol. We don't need a doctor to tell us if we need a Chardonnay or a Sauvignon Blanc, do we? No, you just go to the shop and go, today I feel like red wine, and you pick one. Why do we need a physician to tell us what we need? Because a lot of people using flower don't need that medical supervision, or they don't want that medical supervision. We are responsible enough to know what is good and what is not good for us anymore. We're allowed to eat sugar at a phenomenal rate, so why can't we smoke cannabis? You know, so it would make it easier as well. I think if we removed flower from being a pharmaceutical prescribed medicine, it would make the availability much easier because we wouldn't have all the loopholes to have to jump through. There wouldn't have to be as many import licenses, making the product a lot cheaper. So that's kind of my opinion. It might not be very popular, but I think we kind of need to remove it from the prescribing and just stick to oils and what makes it easy for doctors. I really do feel for doctors because they've got all the diseases they need to know about, all the other drugs that they need to know about as well. And now we're throwing in cannabis with hundreds, if not thousands, of different cultivars that they're supposed to understand. We need the doctors to be able to say, cannabis will be good for you. You need a high THC or a low THC. Go to a cannabis specialist who specializes in it, and then allow people like in this audience who absolutely adore cannabis and absolutely understand it to the nth degree to become specialists in that, and they can then prescribe, they can then recommend a particular cultivar for a person's condition. We've got a whole industry there, and then we've got the economy being stimulated as well. So I think we just need a whole new system when it comes to cannabis flower, not just trying to put it into this pharmaceutical model that we've got here.
Thank you.
I would just want to say that I would agree to that. The only thing I would add to that is we should still maintain some form of regulation in the supply chain to ensure that safe products are ending up in people's hands. Just like food, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else got any views on that, on the flower question?
I think from the doctor's point of view, yes, Callie is absolutely right. It's really complicated to try and decide what to prescribe when it comes to flower. And the bioavailability is going to vary a lot. So it's difficult then to say to somebody with certainty, look, this is going to work for you, or you need this dose. That was the difficult thing for me, was trying to work out what dose does somebody vaporize?
Yeah, dosing is the kind of one of the key kind of issues around this. And sticking with flower on a way, and maybe stay with you, Mark, as well, how do you deal with patients smoking their medicine? Like, whether that's advised or not, it's a reality. And I do speak to patients who, you know, who say that smoking works more than vaporizing or other routes of administration.
I mean, it wasn't a large part of my prescribing, and I only had, from memory, 1 or 2 patients who said they were smoking it, and my duty was to tell them they shouldn't be smoking it because they won't get the right response. But so I've got limited experience of that, really.
Anyone else got any views on smoking? Because it obviously gets into your system quicker, so maybe for short bouts of pain, I don't know.
Anybody in this audience who's vaped and smoked and compared the two, they have different effects. They do have a very different kind of effect. And a lot of people generally say that when they vaped, they feel like they need to smoke because they feel like the full effect hasn't really got there. Again, I think we need to take responsibility for our own health. We need to, stop expecting everybody else to tell us what we should do. Take some responsibility. And we know, we've known since the 90s that, even earlier, that smoking causes cancer. We know that's the risk we're going to take, but if the risk of doing that outweighs the disease you've got, or you're in palliative care at the end of life, surely that's got to be better than nothing.
Yeah.
And I guess I just speak to the science a little bit in that I guess the consideration maybe about vaping versus smoking is probably most people smoke mixing tobacco into their joints, which is fundamentally changing what it is that they're smoking, and they're getting nicotine and a bunch of other chemicals alongside that. So I can appreciate why they're feeling a difference between the two. But scientifically, vaporization at the right temperatures will deliver an effective dose of medication. It depends on the purpose upon which you're trying to reach. And it comes back to the flower question, right? If the intention is to deliver an effective dose of a given substance, of a given medication, then you should probably be taking an oil, rather than trying to aim for vaporization of flower to try and perfect the dose that you're actually getting.
Yeah. Cool. So I think we touched on this again previously. In looking at the future, do you see more sort of medicines that resemble the standard conventional drugs that we take, i.e. pills that are made up of specific formulations of cannabinoids? Do you see that as a route that people are going to go down as this sort of medical cannabis industry develops?
Yes. I think.
Please elaborate.
I think if it's going to go mainstream, then you've got to have products that will look more like medicines to be acceptable, not just to the authorities, but to a certain proportion of patients as well, who don't want to be fiddling with a vaporizer. And somebody with arthritis can't fiddle with that and do that sort of stuff. So that's got to be the way forward.
Yeah.
10 years' time, that's that'll be on the market.
Yeah. And I guess for kids as well, in particular, it's...
Yeah, I was about to say, it's, I was speaking to a family, it's paediatric cancer, but their child was unable to swallow, so you need other forms of administration, not just oils. Obviously, the child can't vape. So yeah, definitely going forward, there's numerous forms of administration would be really beneficial.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd add would be that I think we need to be cognizant that it's not just THC and CBD, as we've said multiple times on this panel. We need to be aware of all the other cannabinoids, of terpenes, flavonoids, and other parts of the plant that can feed into that pharmaceutical analysis and should also be part of the pharmaceuticals that are developed off the back of that. And we need data to do that.
Yes, the key research question, and not enough's going on. Cool. One more question from me before I throw it open to the crowd. The lovely topic of irradiation. So this is quite an issue for some people around. Well, what's the general kind of perspective from you guys, real or perceived, in relation to irradiation of cannabis? Because there is product coming through clinics that is irradiated. I mean, maybe as a distributor, you might have a view on how much flower is irradiated and how much is not.
Yeah, I mean, majority of product available today is irradiated, and to take that one step further, a lot of food we eat today is also irradiated, right? So it's not that irradiation and radiation is something that we don't engage with on almost a daily basis, right? We talk about the banana equivalent dose of radiation. Bananas are radioactive by nature, right? Whenever you eat a banana, you're eating radiation. So irradiation isn't something that we're foreign and is foreign to us generally. There are two sides to this coin, and I appreciate from a consumer's perspective, irradiation may have quality implications when compared to what you're used to some extent. So when you're buying a medicine and it's been irradiated, you may see a degradation in terpenes or a degradation in the flavor profile, whatever it may be, in comparison to what you may be used to receiving on the black market. Now, the flip side of that conversation is the fact that irradiation will kill any potential bacterial mold or microbiological contaminant of your medication, and therefore the safety of your product is utmost from a medicine's perspective. And the MHRA exists. If I may, that product that you're referencing was imported as an IMC GMP product and does not meet the UK's regulation for pharmaceuticals. Any product that has come in under EU GMP and has been irradiated, there have been no mold considerations to date. I say.
So it's a bit of a trade-off, right? So
it's a trade-off, and I'm yet to see a COA or a terpene analysis or a full panel analysis that shows any visible degradation in the product from one side of irradiation to the other. All I've heard is patient testimonials of people saying that it doesn't work as well, and that does need to be taken into consideration.
And
Why are we using the flowers that are being grown in this country rather than importing them and fighting for that right? We've got medical flowers being grown in this country. Why aren't our patients having them?
it's a good question. I mean, I think there's a few... Yeah, sorry. So the question was, why aren't we using flowers that's been grown in the UK? I think there are a few producers who have licenses, but they're not operational yet. So I think hopefully when a few of them come online... true, very true.
But that's licensed medicine, so that's Sativex and Epidiolex, 5GW Pharma.
The point is they're growing it here. You don't need to import it from anywhere.
No, yeah, I agree. But again, back to my point earlier, is that with the government and the licensing, everything that needed to produce cannabis here in the UK, everyone at the moment is under research licenses. Quite a few of them are here today. There is no commercial license other than GW Pharma that I'm aware of, anyway. If
we all know why they got that license.
Yeah, they have had a 20-year head start. But
Sorry, guys, just a note for the audience. Could be leave no shouting out from the audience, could we allow our panelists and our host to kind of direct questioning? Otherwise, we're just going to get a pit of noise.
It's all right. Thank you, Arjun. Cool. So, has anyone got any final points on irradiation?
Yeah, just from a paediatrics perspective, it is really important. We need to know that these oils are very, very safe. We need to know, a slight virus. Now, my son was in intensive care when he caught 2 viruses. He had constant seizures. So if he's become very ill from microbial content, that could kill him.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that these products are extremely safe. And also from our perspective, every flower is irradiated. It's then extracted. So we do lose terpenes, but they're still there present, and these oils are very effective anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I guess it just sounds like a scary word, doesn't it? Irradiation.
Yes, it's that radiation link.
Just to sort of add to that the studies that were done in the Netherlands actually showed that there was no effect on cannabinoid content. But however, when you look at irradiated cannabis...
Does it glow?
Well, I was actually going to say, we've actually got to look at the type of irradiation that's being used and other sterilisation methods. There are new methodology coming on, cold plasma being one of them. It's gamma radiation that's currently being used. But what is the alternative? Is it chemical application onto theirs to assure that this is sterile and it doesn't have anything that is going to be a pathogen to humans? It's a balancing act, and you do also have to look at on the manufacturing side of things. Is the last thing you want is a recall of the product. So you're going to do everything you can in your power to stop that product being recalled due to the fact that it's contaminated with something that could be pathogenic to humans. It shouldn't be about the money, but unfortunately, if a company is losing money, it can't carry on. So it has to do everything in its power to prevent those kind of things happening, or it ends up being a sinking ship.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm conscious of time, so should we throw it open to the crowd? Hands up.
Talk about stock issues and consistency and the need to show efficacy. Certainly in my own treatment since moving to legal products, I've had much greater variance in the product I'm using. When I was sourcing from the legacy market, I was able to source exactly the same thing all the time. I've been prescribed now for 18 months, and there has only been one repeat prescription where I've actually been given the same medication as I had the month before. Every other time I'm prescribed a different product because of a lack of stock. And so it seems bizarre to me that we have a regulatory framework that treats each strain of cannabis as a different medicine that must be prescribed separately, and yet at the same time I can be switched from one medication to another at the drop of a hat simply because there is no stock. When I do find a product that is really good for me, for instance, I really got on with the CMC, which is the balanced 10 strain with CBD. I haven't been able to get that in over 12 months. The only option I have for sourcing a balanced strain is to grow it myself. I mean, how is that an acceptable solution at this point, 4 years post-legalisation?
Arjun, I'll look to you.
I mean, the short answer is it's not. That is not acceptable. You should be able to receive the same product, and you should be able to get a repeat of that same product. Now, there are 2 systems that are working in parallel here. You have an import system regulated by the MHRA, and you have the clinical system where the doctor decides what you are prescribed, and those 2 things aren't fundamentally working together for you, unfortunately. In terms of the supply chain management, I know that is getting better across the industry. I know that we do that well. I am always forward forecasting what my patients are going to need, and I'm always have that in stock. I've not missed a script yet. So it really is on what works for you, and if that being available to you is something that is your right, in my opinion, and you should be able to have that medication available to you every month, so that is delivered to you. Supply chain issues have been a function of issues that have existed and products that have come in, and as you mentioned earlier, the mold, and there have been issues with bugs and other things in products previously, and that has driven slowness in the supply chain because we've had to bring the regulator along the journey with us. And we are doing that, and the industry is working on that continuously. So I know supply chains are getting better, and I know that's something that we're working on very heavily as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ashwin, have we got anyone?
Yeah,
on Zoom?
we've definitely got some very vocal people on the internet. Number one question: why can't we import from California on the medical market? product is such a higher quality? It sounds like a very subjective question, but we'd be interested to know what your opinions are of the different producer regions as well.
Simply, it's not EU GMP.
Yeah, it's not a regulated medicine supply chain, unfortunately, and that has overheads involved in it, and that has controls and checks to ensure that safe medicines are given to patients, and that's fundamentally where it rolls down to. Unfortunately.
Okay, next question. This question is from Margaret. I fear that the push for pharmaceuticals will harm patients like me. I have so many reactions to carrier ingredients in pills and other things that the further you get from the original product, the more likely a reaction is. Do you think there's a possibility for balance so that there are still full extract products in a pharmaceutical system? And I think that's a really interesting question coming from the plant-based side of things where, you know, you have to have grafts, you have to have, you know, clones for consistency.
Yeah, it's a really good question.
I think there were two bits to that question. So there was one about the carrier, so the additives to the actual product there, which should be stated, and everybody is going to have different reaction to different additives, as we all do. Terpenes being a particular one that we have allergic reactions to. Washing powders, for example, quite often you'll have an allergic reaction. It's the terpenes in there. So that's kind of one side of the question. The other side of the question, can I just get the question again? So I'm answering it
I did
correctly.
mumble over the end of that. Do you think there's the possibility for balance so that there are still full extract products in a pharmaceutical system?
I just think we need to not bother trying to put it into the pharmaceutical hole. It's in a league of its own. That's my opinion. I think we need to try and stop putting it into this pharmaceutical model where it won't fit.
Well, I mean, in a way, we were sort of talking about making it into medicines that more people can interact with. You know, my mum, for example, we never go anywhere near cannabis, but if it was in a pill form, maybe we consider it. That to widen access truly to everyone. So, is there a kind of concept of potentially, you know, getting a full expression of a plant, but in a pill form that is stable? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a chemist, but. Is that the aim that we're looking for?
Soft gel capsules, you can still get to an extract, which is then available in a dosed format that you can continue to deliver a dose of. I think if a full spectrum extract were consistent and reliable and refined to the extent where they could consistently produce it at the same full panel COA results, then there's no reason why that shouldn't be considered a pharmaceutical, because the consideration is safety and consistency. So as long as they can maintain consistency, there's no reason it couldn't live in a pharmaceutical world. That being said, where we most likely will end up, as in my hypothesis, let's say, is when pharmaceuticalization of this industry comes out and we end up with little white pills that have cannabis-based or cannabinoids in them, a new market will appear, as it has in Canada, for cannabis consumption, where the adult use market serves that population of patients.
Hello. What do the panel think about the idea that cannabis is much more than a medicine? In fact, it's an essential nutrient. And if we had it in society, in our lives from the get-go, maybe many conditions that take us to the medical cannabis clinic door, we'd never even get there, because many of the conditions that we might get because of a lack of cannabis in our lives may never develop. You know, we all have endocannabinoid systems. As far as I'm aware, our body only makes 2 endocannabinoids, and we need cannabinoids for our endocannabinoid systems to function properly. We all know what our endocannabinoid systems do. For us to actually function properly in our lives, a long time before we ever develop any conditions, surely cannabis should be in our lives as an essential nutrient, like vitamins, you know. And following on from what Callie was saying about removing flour from the pharmaceutical component of cannabis, maybe we could all have it. We could just go to the off-license or Sainsbury's or the garden centre and buy our own preference for our own social, recreational use to help prevent us from being ill in the first place. We see all this pharmaceutical development, and quite rightly, it is going to go down that road of white pills and transdermal patches. But there is a real a real place for the flower, for the cannabis plant, and that should be available. You shouldn't have to be ill to get cannabis. Why should you be criminalized for having cannabis? You know, you should not have to wait to be ill before you are allowed to have cannabis.
Yes, thank you. I mean, it's a much wider debate. So prevention rather than cure. Mark, I'm going to quickly look at you and then maybe Rosie as a patient. So, you know, our medical system is very much based on cure rather than prevention. What would, you know, it's quite a paradigm shift to be able to really advocate that. But how do you see it as a physician?
I don't think anyone's going to argue with the speaker. I think helping with anxiety and sleep and the anti-inflammatory properties, no argument. End of story.
Yeah. Rosie, you're as a patient.
Yeah, I don't know if I made clearly enough, I felt like I had no choice in this country other than to go down the legal route because I had a child, I didn't want to get social services, and as I said, the government, and the way that the stigma in this country tells people that cannabis is evil, tells people, you know, this very small-minded kind of idea of what someone that uses cannabis is for. I wholly believe that, just like pointed out many times, it should be available to people. Why can you go into a pub, a restaurant, a supermarket and buy alcohol for less than £1, but then, and no one bats an eyelid, and you get into fights and A&Es are overrun? You know, that's costing the NHS money. Why are we not putting trust and everything, I don't have the answer, into stopping the stigma and just allowing people to access what they know works for them for a variety of not just health conditions, but just to exist in the society we do and the stresses that people go through on a daily basis. I wholly believe that we need to, talk about it and prove it, that these ideas that people have are fear-based, they are money-based, they are pharmaceuticals, that, you know, from tablets that I've taken in the past. Those were expensive, and the NHS wanted to, you know, gave me them because the pharmaceuticals were profiting. Whereas if I, you know, could just access what I've always known has worked, but no, I've had to go down the legal route. I have to see, you know, clinicians and all this stuff. And unfortunately for me, I'm sad because it takes away from children that have epilepsy that really need these products because they are life-saving. Mine's life-changing, yes, but it's not life-saving, and I wish the funding could go into more for the children. Those are the people that I truly believe need this demographic.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Cool, I think we're out of time there, but thank you so much, guys, for joining us. Please, everyone, put your hands together for the panel.